Change is ubiquitous. Just look at how vastly different the world we live in is compared to just a few decades ago. Gone are the days when any customers could have a car painted any color as long as it was black. Fashion is also a never-ending cycle of change, and the same holds true for technology. A few decades ago, people couldn't even imagine a portable computer. Similarly, whether it may be in response to a major event, a discovery that shakes an organization's core function, or simply the introduction of a new technology, change is also inevitable for organizations. Firms either fail to grow or climb the ladder of success because of their ability to lead and manage change. Yet doing that is notoriously difficult, and there are no universal best approaches. Nevertheless, one firm which has successfully reinvented itself in order to remain competitive is Netflix.
Roca, of everything that got nominations, what stands out to you most?
Well, I think what you hit up nail on the head right off the bat, the idea of Netflix beating HBO.
Last year, The Verge attributed Netflix's rise to strategically playing the odds.
It scored 112 nominations, up 91 from last year, which is just insane.
Hey, today, right now, you are witnessing the birth of a global TV network.
Video streaming site Netflix reported second quarter revenue of $1.6 billion, now topping 65 million subscribers.
But how did it all start? Despite being a powerhouse in the modern media consumption market, Netflix came from humble beginnings. Founded in 1997 by Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph, Netflix first started as a mail-order company delivering DVDs to customers' doors. Their first pay-per-view business model was later changed in favor of an all-you-can-watch monthly subscription service, and soon the company began growing. But after the dot-com bubble burst and the 9/11 attacks, the company started losing money and was forced to lay off 30% of their employees. Things changed at the beginning of 2002 when customers started ordering more and more DVDs. But with 30% of their employees gone, Netflix could not meet the demand of this group of stakeholders. There were also pressures from the remaining employees who were overwhelmed by the amount of work and felt that the company's policies and style were preventing them from being productive and creative. Top management, especially Chief Talent Officer Patty McCord, was also stressing a move away from a conventional regulatory and performance management approach towards a practice of engaging people's innate enthusiasm for learning. To accommodate the divergent needs of these three groups of stakeholders, Netflix decided that the change in HR was needed. In today's video, we will unravel how the company recovered by implementing one of the most important cultural change programs in history. The presentation will involve an interview with Netflix's CEO, Reed Hastings, discussing how the company reinvented HR, changing its values, culture, and policies in the quest for becoming a learning organization. To complement the interview, we will apply and critique a range of techniques and models of change. For an in-depth analysis of the situation, McKinsey's 7S model, Kolb's learning cycle, and Lewin's 3-step change model, among other theories of change, will be used. Lastly, key takeaways will be presented.
Can you please tell us what this cultural change meant for Netflix and why it was needed in the first place?
Yeah, so after 2001, there was no doubt we were struggling and losing money. With competitors such as Hollywood Film and Blockbuster dominating the market, we recognised that in the long run, the only sustainable source of competitive advantage was our ability to learn faster than competitors. Our goal was to cultivate a learning organisation, and this required drastic change. Realising that we were faltering, we wanted to create an environment where individuals were not inhibited by myriads of rules, allowing them to continuously learn and become the best versions of themselves. We analysed our company's environment and practices using McKinsey's 7S model to see whether a change was actually needed. Our aim was to look at the 7 elements and identify if they effectively aligned with each other. As a management team, we agreed that becoming a learning organisation depended on flexibility, responsiveness, and new capabilities. But the core of our organisation, our values, did not align with this strategy, so we sought to renew these, changing from excellence and respect to freedom and responsibility. With the change in values, one in structure was also needed. We realised that being too bureaucratic and hierarchical did not align to these values. So our goal was to become flatter. We devised an action plan, which acknowledged that our new values, freedom and responsibility, meant that a new style was also needed, one that could unlock people's energy and facilitate the creativity we desired.
So would you say there are any blockages to creativity?
Well, at that time, I think we were many. We were focusing too much on short-term metrics, and we were all resisting conflict and diversity. We also recognised that learning was somehow constrained by our management mechanisms that were encouraging uniformity. Our reward system was focusing too much on performance rather than creativity, and there was an overemphasis on execution. And funny enough, we were in the entertainment industry, and our culture was not encouraging fun at work.
So how did you address these?
So earlier that year, we had to let go of 30% of our team, and we were underperforming. It was a radical change which required critical measures. With a strong sense of failure and uncertainty, my task was to restore morale by offering a new vision. Our cultural change followed the pattern advocated by Kurt Lewin's three-stage theory of change. It started with a period of unfreezing, instead of adopting a top-down approach and forcing a new mission statement on people. We created a story and broke it down into plausible narratives which could resonate with employees. So the story was one of our rebirth and one about us being the underdog, trying to slay the Goliath, Blockbuster, by becoming a more flexible, fun, stimulating and creative organisation. The narrative included the metaphor of the sports team. Unlike other companies that envision their team as a family built on unconditional love, Netflix aimed to resemble a dream team. Thus, we wanted our people to give their best for the team, care intensely about each other, while also knowing that they may not be on the team forever. Similarly, employees, individuals' performance count towards the collective achievements of the team. This requires a strong sense of ownership, an idea circulated throughout the company using the pick up your trash metaphor. This meant taking care of problems, small and large, without ever thinking, that's not my job. So when everyone was prepared, McCord and I executed the change by devising a deck outlining the main aspects of our new culture. The deck emphasised a supportive culture, shared vision and effective communication as key factors for our organisation. This entailed a series of HR innovations that were previously unheard of.
So what innovations are we talking about then?
So breaking away from the existing paradigms and revamping our values and norms, our innovation presented characteristics of second-order changes. I think the most groundbreaking policies were centred around our values and our reward strategy. For example, having freedom and responsibility as our core values materialised into a change in our vacation policies. Instead of shifting to a formal system, we went in the opposite direction. Employees were encouraged to take whatever time they felt was appropriate.
I took so much vacation this year.
I get asked that question a lot by my friends, and it's, I'm taking a vacation all the time.
To change behaviour and existing schemata, upper management was also encouraged to set a precedent by taking vacation time themselves and communicating that to their employees.
Also your manager, your director and so on, how they set the example, and I think they've done a pretty good job at also showing it. I mean, it's okay, like in the summer, you take a couple of weeks of vacation.
As you can see, we wanted to avoid what is known as the empty shell phenomenon, one in which policies monitor and document a person's actions but do not precipitate further action. Moreover, our reward strategy, pay top of the mark, entailed that instead of larding stock options on top of the salary, we let employees choose how much, or if any, of their compensation would be in the form of equity. If employees want a stock option, we reduce their salaries accordingly. We believe that they were sophisticated enough to understand the trade-offs and judge their personal tolerance for risk. All of these have allowed us to achieve a unique and unprecedented culture and slowly become a learning organisation.
A learning organisation is an organisation that is continually expanding its capacity to create its future. Similarly, an organisational learning is the intentional use of learning processes to continuously transform the organisation in a direction that is increasingly satisfying to stakeholders. In other words, it involves the learning and relearning of complex organisational interactions in order for the system to survive. You can quickly notice the socio-relational context for learning and how interpretation, sense-making and insight are all gained through interaction. Netflix, as a non-physical entity, could not learn on its own. They were reliant on the continuous learning efforts of their employees. But how do individuals learn? According to Kolb's learning cycle, individuals need to, firstly, attend a concrete experience and reflect systematically in order to learn something new or improve existing skills. Then, they need to observe reflectively about the phenomenon they have noticed and ask questions such as, what worked? What failed? Why did others and I behave the way we did? These guiding questions lead to a generalization of the reflected upon experience into an abstract conceptual framework. Finally, they need to actively experiment with the world to see how their tentative experiences shape up. So with the changing culture, Netflix was trying to create circumstances under which employees could be competent in each of these 4 stages. By making their structure flatter and their style more innovative, Netflix were eliminating any barriers that preventing them from fostering a double-loop learning style. In the transition from a focus on single-loop learning to a double-loop one, employees were encouraged to challenge the status quo and question the relevance of the firm's operating norms. These actions were animated by the humanistic belief that learning was able to lead to creativity. Nevertheless, we cannot discard the idea that this may have embodied subtle forms of control. This way, organisational learning can resemble a new and post-bureaucratic managerial techniques which may instigate regimes of self-surveillance and self-control.
And so, was there any resistance to this change?
So it is common wisdom that 70% of change efforts fail, as both organisations and their members tend to resist change. Thus, an interpretive lens, we need to look at how different organisational actors were impacted by the change and how they made sense of it. A prevailing concern people had relating to the new vacation policy was that it might be inconsistent. People were worried that some managers might allow tons of time off while others would be stingy. In general, I worried more about fairness than consistency, because the reality is that in any organisation, the highest performing and most valuable employees get more leeway. Furthermore, we had to take into account individual satisfaction by giving employees a voice. Collective countervailing resistance may have increased this, which could ultimately affect efficiency and productivity through competing agendas. However, we ensured that this was minimal through a clear consultation and support on an individual by individuals basis.
So what do you think was the biggest factor that led to the successful cultural change?
I would definitely say the people, as they are the core of our business. I think that the true enabler of no rules was in fact our revisited hiring policy, as we started hiring people who put the company's interests first and desire a high-performance workplace. By doing better at hiring and by fostering learning, we were creating a culture that made it easier for employees to acquire, improve, and transfer knowledge.
According to Blackler, there are 5 overlapping forms of knowledge: embrained, embodied, embedded, encultured, and encoded. The last 3 types were most prevalent in Netflix's new culture. While the embedded type refers to the collective and relational knowledge present in the Dream Team metaphor, the encultured knowledge aligns with the new policies which aim to achieve shared understanding. The actual deck documented new codes of practice, thus encoding the new information and knowledge. Based on these types of knowledge, there are 4 main types of organisation: expert dependent, knowledge routinized, symbolic analyst dependent, and communication intensive. From the context of knowledge, Netflix's change in culture led to a transition from a symbolic analyst dependent organisation to a communication intensive one. Both types encourage creative achievements as they put great emphasis on entrepreneurial problem solving and focus on novel problems as opposed to familiar ones. However, while the first is centred around embrained knowledge of members depending heavily upon contributions of key individuals, a communication-intensive organisation focuses on embedded and encultured knowledge. With encultured knowledge as a foundation, Netflix nourished collaboration and collective effort.
So having communicated these changes, how did you ensure that they lasted?
So going back to Kurt Lewin's change model, we wanted to make the change permanent. The refreezing period required a shift from command and control to support and guidance. Therefore, we based our knowledge management strategy on encouraging and facilitating the emergence of communities of practice. This way, tacit knowledge could be shared indirectly and redeveloped.
Communities of practice are defined as groups of people who share a similar role within the organisation and seek to solve the same problems. By sharing the experiences and knowledge in free-flowing, creative ways, practitioners identify innovative solutions learning from one another. As opposed to teams, communities of practice are self-governing and informally formed, with minimum managerial input as members set out their own agendas and goals. We can look at their members as writers of change who engage in dialogic learning to give meaning to the metaphors and stories told throughout the organisation. Communities of practice can drive strategy, generate new lines of business, help solve problems and promote the spread of best practices. However, they require high effort and investment. While senior managers' involvement in the community should be kept minimal, it is crucial that they provide the right infrastructure for the achievement of full potential. Another limitation may be the difficulty in assessing their values, as results generally appear in the work of teams and business units, not in the communities themselves.
Why were the communities of practice important to Netflix?
So the success of communities of practice was owed to two main elements: employees' shared interest and the company's official support. As a result of our new hiring policy, employees shared the same interests and thirst for high performance. This, coupled with the unique embedded culture cultivated by our company through storytelling, led to the development of high commitment among employees. Individuals no longer felt restricted by management or other senior authorities. Consequently, novel ideas were developed and creativity and innovation were encouraged in an organic, spontaneous and informal way. The fit of community of practices at Netflix was also owed to their alignment to core values and objective to become a flatter organisation. This was particularly important given that communities of practice cannot be simply set up. I would say that the presence of communities of practice was crucial during our transition due to their ability to reinforce and renew themselves as they generate knowledge. They helped us permanently unlock creativity and foster learning.
Hastings, along with top management, created an image for the future, a shared vision for all employees, to become one of the leading firms in the entertainment industry by fostering learning and knowledge sharing. This idea united everyone together around the common sense of destiny. To restore morale of employees, meet the demand from customers, and satisfy top management's desire to increase productivity and creativity, Netflix began by changing their values to freedom and responsibility.
The biggest reason why freedom and responsibility drives the success of Netflix is it encourages us all to be big risk takers.
Top management successfully adopted a system thinking, understanding the interconnected nature of their company. They quickly recognized how a change in one of the elements of McKinsey's 7S, in this case values, had effects on all other elements and required implementing a new organizational design. Today, continuous review of each area is critical to see if the elements are still aligned. So the introduction of the culture deck has helped them facilitate knowledge production and encourage learning and creativity. This has helped the company overcome losses in productivity and start turning a profit in 2003.
It took you 4 years to make money?
It took us at least 4 years, till 2003.
The well-articulated storytelling narratives, coupled with the bottom-up approach and high level of freedom, enhanced employees' innate enthusiasm and energy, further driving productivity. From an ethical perspective, when moving away from conventional and regulatory management, Netflix not only gave its employees a voice, but also encouraged them to challenge the status quo and question the company's operating norms, making them the writers of change. As opposed to conventional companies, Netflix built a culture based on mutual trust, highlighted by the vacation and top-of-market reward policies. To ensure that this culture change lasted and to build a sense of genuine togetherness, Netflix also encouraged and facilitated the emergence of communities of practice, offering support to all employees. This was based on the CEO's belief that group knowledge could exceed individual learning and facilitate coordinated action. Nevertheless, the company is deemed to have just started its journey as a learning organization, and as their culture deck highlights, the change is an ongoing process.
And that deck we worked on and continue to work on as a living document. Every year we would try to define some things and make some improvements about how we felt was there.
Beyond new technology, market crashes, and societal shifts, the secret ingredient to their continued success has been their company culture. Without that radical culture change in 2002, maybe this documentary would have been on Blockbuster.